right, so as previously mentioned, if you have a block, definitely feel free to have that handy. If not, totally fine not to have one. We are going to start out in a comfortable seated position, but as always, feel free to take a different position. I'm just tucking the block underneath my hips to give me a little bit more stability and a little bit more of a ability to be able to take my knees and my legs down closer towards the mat. And so here, just simply starting out by stopping the momentum of what has been happening so far in the day. And taking a few longer, deeper breaths. Sometimes it can be helpful to inhale to the count of 5, inhaling deeply, and then exhaling deeply to the count of 5. Feeling all of those sensations in the body as the breath moves in and as the breath flows out. Inhaling to the count of 5 or whatever count is appropriate for you. Maybe it's a little less or a little more. And exhaling to the count of 5. Breathing in fully and breathing out fully. And then after about 5 or so rounds of breath, feel free to begin to resume your normal rate of breathing. Allowing the breath to slow down and noticing the changes, the subtle changes that deep breathing may have caused in the system. And I have been working a little bit lately with comfort zones. And I read some new research that indicates that people actually can change. If you are more of an introverted person and you want to be a little bit more extroverted, for example, you can change. You can change in a multitude of different ways. And the big component to it is stepping outside of one's comfort zone. So if you're a little bit shy and you want to be a little less shy, it's a matter of kind of playing that edge of being out there just a little bit more to the point where it's a little bit uncomfortable, but not horrible, of course. And just kind of playing with that edge. And then eventually our range of what feels okay begins to expand. And of course, that's just a silly kind of example. There's lots of different ways to play those types of edges within our lives. And I found that if I kind of couple that with a sense of really fierce compassion and kindness for myself, that can be a really beneficial kind of balance. So stepping outside of the comfort zone, but wrapping that up in a sense of self-compassion so that it's not painful, it's not a punishment, it's not ill-intended in any way. So just a suggestion that as our shared intention for our practice today, that we maybe focus a little bit on comfort zones. Is there a space within your life that is maybe gotten a little bit too stagnant or too comfortable? And is there a way to expand that a little bit, all the while wrapping it in a blanket of self-compassion and kindness? And we'll talk about that a little bit throughout the practice today, because that is something that can be mirrored in our physical movements in our movement practice today in class. And so perhaps sitting with those words just a little bit longer, breathing, noticing. And then from there, eyes can stay closed or you can open them. We're going to take a few shoulder rolls. So lifting the shoulders up, taking them back, drawing shoulder blades together, taking them forward again, continuing that circular motion, warming up the shoulders, letting go of tension, and then reversing direction of those circles. And then releasing the arms. Hands can come back towards the knees if you'd like. And we'll take our left shoulder over towards our left ear, keeping the collarbone broad, and then taking that right hand and just pressing the heel of the hand away, and perhaps moving a little bit side to side, forward and back. Noticing where the stretch can be felt. And then replacing that right hand, taking right shoulder over towards right, or taking right ear over towards right shoulder. Collarbone nice and broad. Staying there or taking that left hand and pressing it away. Flexing the hand and maybe taking the hand forward and back a bit. Being curious about where the stretch can be felt in different ways by adding that movement. And coming back to center, both hands on knees. And we'll take a few rounds of seated cat-cow, tucking the tailbone under. Feeling that stretch throughout the back as you tuck the chin and draw the shoulder blades apart. And then with the next inhalation, lifting the heart, the chest, opening up. And taking that at your own pace, moving through places that might feel a little bit tighter. Warming the body up, warming the spine up, moving with the breath. Eyes can be closed or opened. And then the next time you're leaning back, hands can stay on the knees, and we'll just start to experiment with engaging the core a little bit more and perhaps lifting those crossed ankles just to hover above the mat. So kind of a mini modified boat position. Just a little abdominal wake up. And then taking the chest forward, stretching, and then rounding the back and coming into that modified boat pose. Core is engaged. Inhaling forward, reaching the chest, and then exhaling back to that modified boat, finding that balance point. And one last time, inhaling forward and exhaling, finding that balance. And then crossing the legs in the opposite way that they were crossed before, so perhaps the more unusual way. And we'll take the hands to lace in front of us. As we exhale, flip the hands and push the heels of the hands away, rounding through the upper back. If that bothers the shoulders, feel free not to have fingers laced. Inhale, reach the arms up. Elongate through the sides of the waist, crown of the head, and then reach those arms around, bringing them back to center, lacing the fingers, pushing away, inhaling up, exhaling down, Bringing the hands back together, and then on the next exhale, pushing the hands away. Inhaling up, exhaling down, inhaling together, exhaling to lace and round. So just kind of making that a fluid movement through the shoulders. Moving the spine from flexion to extension, lengthening and rounding. And maybe taking that one more time. And releasing down from that. We'll plant the left hand at the left side. Reach the right arm up and open. Take the gaze up towards the ceiling. And then take that right hand to frame that left knee, hinging over that left leg, getting a stretch through the back, through the hips. And inhaling, rising back up. We'll take the right hand to the right side. Left arm reaches up and over. Elongating from the fingertips down through the hip. And exhale, frame the right leg, hinge over at the hip, elongate. And make your way back up to seated. Now here, if you'd like to stay seated, you can. If you're okay with coming to all fours, we're going to come to all fours. And if you are seated, you can do this with your opposite hand. Otherwise, if you're kneeling, we're going to take that right hand and just flip it so the palm of the hand is up, giving ourselves a little bit of a wrist stretch. You can slide forward and back a little bit, feeling where the stretch can be felt through the wrist. And then replace that hand, and we'll take the opposite hand. Palm of the hand up, a little forward and back glide. And releasing that side. From here, taking right hand to the back of the head, inhale up, and exhale, take that right hand kind of over towards the left forearm, and then inhale back up. Keeping length in the spine. I move my knees back a little bit so my spine can be a little longer. If you don't want to be kneeling, you can do this from a seated position. And then releasing that side, we'll take the opposite side, taking that left hand to the back of the head, inhaling up and exhaling, taking that elbow towards the forearm. Hips stay pretty steady here. Getting a little more limber and open in the upper body. And then releasing from that. Either taking a kneeling cat-cow, or if you are seated, you can be in your seated cat-cow. Inhaling, opening the chest, lifting the tailbone, and then exhaling to round. I'm actually going to turn this way because that's where the microphone is. And then from here, you could take your left foot up. So the heel is kind of pressing up. Hips are pretty square to start. Weight is evenly distributed into the two arms. And then you can start to point that foot and begin to lift the chest into a spinal extension, cow pose, strong cow, and then strong cat, drawing knee in towards the nose and rounding the back, contracting the abdominals, inhaling, lifting, feeling that opening through the front body, through the hip, and exhaling, rounding. And last time, inhaling, lifting, and exhaling, rounding, and replacing that left knee. We'll do the same thing on the opposite side. So starting out with a flexed right foot. Hips are pretty even, engaging through the glutes and hamstring muscles. Neutral spine. And then we'll begin to point the toes, lift the heart, coming into our strong cow pose. And then strong cat, rounding the spine, knee to nose, inhaling to lift, and exhaling to round. And one last time, inhaling to lift, and exhaling to round. You can take the big toes together, knees apart, press back to child's pose, or you could come to your belly for windshield wiper legs. Tiptoeing the hands a little bit more forward, elongating the spine. Maybe taking the forehead from side to side, kind of massaging the brow a little bit. And then from there, sliding all the way forward into a prone position on the belly. Hands can be just underneath the shoulders. Legs are engaged, and we'll inhale, lift up for cobra. Just a small cobra. Exhale, lower down. Hands come now to kind of goalpost hands. Fingertips lifted up, kind of tenting the fingers. And we'll inhale over towards the left. Exhale, center. Inhale over towards the right. Just sweeping the chest down, lifting the heart up from side to side. And releasing from that. From there, coming into Sphinx pose, shoulders right underneath, or elbows right underneath the shoulders. Tractioning the forearms back towards you, reaching the heart forward. Pubic bone presses down, legs are engaged. Collarbone is broad, just feeling that sense of reaching the heart forward at the same time that you're tractioning the elbows back towards you. Getting some length and lift through the spine, through the chest. And then releasing from that. If it is okay for you, we're going to come into hover pose, which is like plank except on the forearms. So you can take your knees underneath you and lift. The knees are going to be way back from the hips, not underneath the hips. Or you can come to the balls of the feet, more like plank pose, hugging the belly in, lengthening from the heels through the crown of the head, trying to keep your collarbone and your shoulder blades pretty square rather than rounding through the upper back or dipping through the upper back. And then lowering down from there. From there, you can walk back to child's pose, or you could rest in windshield wiper legs, or rest in stillness on the belly. Any of those options are fine. I'm just taking a moment here to check in with your intention for the practice. There are different ways throughout the practice today that you can just kind of play around with that notion of being slightly outside of the comfort zone in a way that is kind and compassionate. And then from there, we'll begin to come forward to the top of the mat, finding a gentle forward fold. Knees can be soft, and you could take opposite hands to opposite elbows. Take a little sway of the torso side to side, keeping the spine lengthening, crown of the head reaching towards the floor. Invite some softness into the face and the jaw.
And with the next inhalation, hands can be on the mat or on the shins or chair if you're using one. We're reaching the chest forward for a halfway lift. Weight comes to the balls of the feet. Lengthened spine. And then keeping that length in the spine, knees come a little softer, we'll hinge forward into our forward fold. Shaking the head gently, no here. Releasing the neck a bit more, releasing the jaw a bit more. And then checking in with the feet, making sure they're about hip width, not rotated in or out too much unless you need to make that compensation for a specific injury. And then rooting through the feet to rise, coming all the way up to standing. Hands can trace the legs. Inhaling, reaching up here. And exhaling, taking hands to heart center. Feet can stay about hip width or they could come a little bit closer. We're going to sink down to chair pose. So weight might be a bit more in the heels. We want to keep that low back from having pain, and sometimes pain can occur when we stick the tailbone way back and get a deep arch in the low back. So within your own body, figuring out if that kind of needs to lengthen or tuck a little bit more. Quadricep muscles engaged. And maybe now you're past that comfort zone a little bit. And that is okay as long as it's in a kind and compassionate way and not inflicting pain. Breathing here for another breath or two. And then on the next inhalation, arms can reach up, open up through the chest, maybe take the gaze up towards the ceiling. And then exhale, hands come back through to heart center, and we're hinging at the hips, folding forward. On the next inhalation, find that halfway lift to lengthen, and then exhale, folding back in. We're going to step both feet back into plank position. You can be on the knees or on the balls of the feet. Either way, finding length, trying to keep everything. In Pilates, they talked about it a lot as a cereal box. So that rectangular shape of the torso, like a cereal box that you don't want to crumple. You don't want one side to be lower or to be rounded or to be dipped. Just trying to keep it as rectangular as possible. Core engaged, shoulders even. And then on the knees or not, lowering all the way down to the mat, untucking the toes, inhaling up for cobra, making sure that the glutes are engaged, legs are active, pelvic bone roots down, pubic bone roots down, and then lowering down from that. Tucking under the toes, and from here, you can come to all fours first, and then press back to downward facing dog. Hips are nice and high, spine is lengthened. Weight pretty evenly distributed into the hands. And if you'd like to, you can take your right leg and lift it up high. If that doesn't feel safe, please feel free not to do it. Right heel lifts high, hips stay pretty square, left heel reaches down. And then from there, bending that right knee, and in one big step or several small steps, taking it forward to the top of the mat. Spin that left heel down, coming into warrior one. Feel free once you come standing to readjust the stance a little bit. Arms can reach up. And if it feels okay for you, maybe lifting the gaze a little bit skyward, lifting the heart a little bit skyward. If this arm variation doesn't suit you, you can take goalpost arms. And then taking those hands to lace at the low back, lifting the heart a bit more. drawing shoulder blades towards one another, and then bowing forward to humble warrior, rounding through the back. Feel free to place hands down on something for an additional point of contact. Leave them at the low back or take those laced fingers up towards the ceiling. Spine is rounded. That right outer hip and right knee hug towards midline. Head hugs towards midline. And then we'll release the hands down to the mat, down to the chair, whatever you're using. Maybe you have 2 blocks. And we're coming into standing split. So taking that left leg high and folding over the right leg. So kind of like a single leg forward fold. Hips are pretty neutral rather than opening the left hip up. And then option to add movement. So bending through that standing right knee and tapping the left shin. And then lengthening right knee, extending left leg. Taking that a couple more times. Again, checking in with yourself. Maybe this is just outside of the comfort zone, or maybe it's too far, or maybe it's not enough. And the next time that leg comes down, we are going to cross it behind the standing leg. So that right leg is kind of just, or that left leg is just kind of behind at an angle. And then we'll walk both hands over towards the right. Getting an IT band stretch. And then coming back to center, stepping that left leg back, and then also stepping the right leg back to meet it. Coming back to our downward facing dog. And this time, if you did it on the other side and you want to do it on this side, we're taking that left leg high, right heel reaches down, single leg downward facing dog. And then taking that left leg forward in one big step or a few small steps. We'll spin the right heel down and make our way up to our warrior 1 on this side. Goal posting the arms or reaching the arms, chest lifts, pressing down firmly through the right pinky edge of your foot, getting a little more openness through the hip flexor muscles, the chest. And breathing here. Feeling firmly rooted in the feet. And then taking laced fingers to the low back if that's okay for your shoulders. Drawing shoulder blades together, lifting the heart open. And then rounding down, drawing that left shoulder just kind of towards the inner left knee. Laced fingers can reach up, or you could take the hands down to the mat or the chair for additional support. And breathing here. Releasing laced fingers, taking them to the mat and preparing for our standing splits, elevating the right leg, folding over the left. Hips are pretty square rather than opening the right on top of the left. Core is engaged. And then adding movement if that is appropriate for you. So slight bend in the left knee, tapping right shin, inhaling to lift and lengthen, and exhaling to tap. Inhaling, lift, and exhaling to tap. And then stepping that right foot kind of behind and at an angle, and walking hands over towards the left. So giving yourself that IT band stretch now on the right side, elongating the torso. And walking hands back to center, taking that right foot back to the lunge position, and then left foot back to meet the right in downward facing dog. And pedaling the feet, and just as you pedal the feet, kind of walking them forward up towards the top of the mat. Inhale for your halfway lift, kind of that springboard position. Weight is a bit more in the balls of the feet. Heels are light, chest is lifted. Exhale, soften the knees, folding in. Feet are about hip width distance apart. And taking a moment to let go of effort in the face, the shoulders, the upper body. And then rooting through the feet to rise. Hands can trace up the legs if you like, articulating the spine up to standing. Shoulders come neutral. Hands come to the heart. And we're sinking down into chair pose once again. And double checking in with the pelvis that it's not too tucked and that it's not too sticking out. Finding that neutral space where the low back feels best in your body. And that's going to look different for different people. We have different types of spines, and all of us are different. So finding that kind of answer exploration for yourself. And breathing here. Hands can stay at the heart, or if you want to reach, you can reach. Goal post is another option. And then on the next inhalation, reaching the arms up. And exhaling, releasing back to neutral standing. Taking a moment here, feeling firmly rooted. Rooted through the feet and lifting through the crown of the head. Here we have an option to take the block with us. We're going to take the block with us, and we are going to step back into a lunge position. And let's step back with the left foot. Block can be just in front of you. And then we're going to lengthen both legs and then reach that block up overhead. If you don't have a block, you can just kind of pretend like you have one. It's not that heavy, so it's not really adding that much. It's just something to focus on. And then bending both knees and bringing the block back down towards the belly area, I guess. And then inhaling, reaching up, straightening the legs, and exhaling, bending both knees, lowering the block down, taking that another time or two. And this next time, it's an option to take a little bit of a twist with it. So as you bend down, you can take that block over towards that right hip, rotating the chest, and then inhaling, lengthening back up again. So it's a rotation through the upper torso. Hips stay relatively neutral. Inhaling up and exhaling, twist. And then coming back to center. You can keep the block if you want to. You certainly don't have to. We're going to step that left foot forward. And from here, hug the left knee in towards the chest. And you can take ankle circles if you'd like to. And release that side down. Grabbing a hold of the block again, if you're using one, and stepping the right leg back this time. So finding that strong lunge position, frontal hip points turn forward towards the top of the mat, and we'll add that movement. Inhaling, lengthening up, exhaling, bending the elbows, bending the knees, pulling the block in towards the belly, and inhaling, rising up. So taking that movement at your own pace. If you're like me and you have a wall handy, you can certainly use that. Or if you have a chair, something sturdy, counter. Engaging through the core as you do this. And again, maybe you're just past that comfort zone, kind of checking in with yourself there. Is this okay? And the next time we're up, we're going to change that movement if it feels safe for you. So as you exhale, taking that block, rotating it now over towards the left hip, and then inhaling up. Taking that movement at your own pace. Working the oblique muscles a little bit more as you bend through both knees and take that rotation. And last time, exhaling and inhaling. You can set the block down if you'd like and hug the knee in towards the chest in one big step or a few smaller steps, and take those ankle rotations. And releasing from that. So again, taking the block along with us, we're going to step into a wide stance. So you can start out here by taking the block to your left side. We're going to use it later for half moon pose. We don't need it right now, or if you want a chair over that, whatever you might use for half moon pose. And starting out, we're going to come into a wide-legged forward fold. Toes slightly turned in, heels slightly turned out, finding that hinge at the hips, length in the spine. Hands can come down towards the mat, and then walking both hands over towards the left. Getting a side stretch, continuing to reach the right hip back towards the right. And then walking both hands over towards the right, pulling that left hip now kind of in opposition back towards the left. Getting that increased side body stretch. And then coming back to center, and hands can come to the hips or climb up the legs, rooting down through the big toe edges of the feet as you come up to standing. And we'll turn our left toes forward as we come into warrior two. Left outer thigh kind of presses back as if I'm trying to press it towards that wall behind me. Engaging through the glutes a little bit more that way and getting a deeper stretch through the inner left leg. Rooting down firmly through all sides of the feet, and then isometrically kind of hugging the inner thighs together. Somebody mentioned one time in a class, like as if you had a giant ball or yoga block and you were trying to squeeze it between the thighs in warrior two, giving you a little more strength and stability in the pose. We'll inhale to reverse, taking that right hand to the right leg. And exhale to extend. If you'd like to use your block, sometimes people feel like they need or want a little bit more of a stretch. You can take the left hand down to the block. Left elbow can kind of gently press into the left knee to keep it open. Not so much the knee, but the thigh, I should say.
And coming up, you can keep that block in your hand if you have it. Scooch the feet a little closer together, and then we'll come into half moon pose. Feel free to use something more sturdy than a block if you'd like to. And taking the feet a bit closer together, we're going to lift up and open through that right leg. Lift up and open through the right shoulder. Gaze can stay down at the mat. Right arm can stay down, or you can lift it up. Tucking a bit under with the left hip. I find it useful sometimes to flex the right foot just for a little more stability, as if I was pushing that right foot into a wall. And then take that bend in the left knee, coming back to center. And you can take the block over to the right side now. Pivoting the feet a little bit, so once again, heels are slightly out, toes are slightly in. And exhale, hinging forward. This time, if you want to, you can circle grip your big toes with your first two fingers and your thumb to give yourself a little more leverage to pull down with a lengthened spine. You could grab a hold of the ankles or the calves if you wanted to, or you can simply take the hands down to the surface underneath you. And breathing here. Continuing to root down through the big toe edges of the feet. And then with the next inhalation, climbing all the way back up to standing. And we'll turn the right toes towards that block and find your way into warrior two, heel to arch approximately with the alignment. Hips will open towards the long end of the mat. Shoulders down and away from the ears. In a lot of these poses, I like to take my hands actually to my hips and pull them down and away from the rib cage, and then reach the crown of the head up just in an effort to elongate the spine, and then adding the arms as a final thought. Taking a few breaths here, really strong and rooted through the feet, the legs, re-engaging with that sense of squeezing the inner thighs towards one another as you press the feet down, making the pose a little more powerful and sturdy. And then from here, left hand slides down the left leg, right arm reaches up and over, elongating through the right side body. And on the next exhale, you can use your forearm or you can use your block and come into extended side angle. If you're using the block, the elbow can just kind of press a little bit into the inner thigh in an effort to open up a bit more. Continuing to keep length in the torso. Try not to lean forward too much. And then from here, using that block as you take the feet a little closer together and then come into that half moon pose. Left leg lifts, left hip lifts and stacks on top of right. Right shoulder stacks on top of, or left shoulder actually stacks on top of right. We're just breathing here, getting that openness through the hips, through the shoulders. And then softening through that right knee and replacing that left foot down onto the mat. From here, why don't we come into a seated position. And you can bring your block along with you if you have one. We'll take that block and place it between the two thighs, giving it a little bit of a squeeze. You can have it down lower than the knees, because sometimes it feels kind of bad to have it right on the knees, or you can have it up a little higher. Just make sure it's not kind of digging into a tender area on the legs. And from there, we'll find this different variation of boat pose, squeezing the thighs towards one another. Heels can be elevated or not as we lean back. Lift the chest, engage the core. And breathing here. Again, experimenting with that comfort zone a little bit. Maybe staying just a little bit longer than you want to, but with that sense of kindness and compassion, with the goal being focused on growth rather than like punishment or something like that. And then releasing from that. From here, we're going to do one more boat variation. So this one, again, using the block if you have one kind of as a driver. So coming back into boat pose with heels planted or not, and then taking that block and just tapping it from side to side, keeping the lower body super steady as you move, trying to move pretty much just rib cage and above. Everything else is pretty sturdy. So almost as if you were still squeezing that block between the two thighs, not letting the knees and hips shift around too much. Maybe you can see me better if I'm facing this way, I'm not sure. And releasing down from that. Legs can come long here, and we'll sit up really tall. If you have a strap, feel free to use it. You can take your strap and loop it around your feet. If you don't have one, it's not a problem at all. And we'll begin to hinge at the hips, keeping that spine really lengthened. Drawing the toes back towards you, either with the strap, or hands could be on the feet or the shins or the thighs. Trying as best as possible to keep the heart lifted and open. And then from here, inhaling, elongating through the torso. And we'll take a hold of our left foot, and you can have the right foot bent or lengthened, and we're going to just take some ankle circles here. And then replace that left foot. Hands can come behind you, and you can lift the chest here. You could also lift the hips up here, lifting through the chest. Weight is in that left foot and right heel. And then releasing down from that, hugging in a little deeper with that left knee towards the chest. Right hand can come around to grab a hold of it, and we'll take the left hand behind as we take a twist. Gazing out perhaps over the left shoulder, keeping the right shoulder nice and open, actively pressing it back. And then coming back through to center, we'll do the same thing on the opposite side. So taking that right leg, hugging it in, and taking some ankle circles here. Moving the ankle from side to side or spinning it around, spreading the toes a little bit, lubricating the joint. Moving it in any way that feels
supportive, interesting. And then taking that foot and placing it down. Hands can come behind again. And inhale, lift the chest, perhaps also lift the hips. Breathing here. And exhaling, releasing down, hugging in a little deeper with that right foot towards the glute. And taking the left hand now around that right leg, and the right hand comes behind as we take a twist over towards the right. Gaze can come right, shoulder reaches back. And exhale, gently coming back to center and beginning to roll down onto the mat. You can hug the knees in towards the chest if you'd like to once you get here. And we'll release the left leg. It can be bent or lengthened. And we'll take hands around the back of the right leg, hugging in towards the hip crease, allowing the shoulders to make contact with the back of the mat. Neck is long on all sides if possible. We'll begin to take a bend in that right knee and grab a hold of the sole of the foot, coming into a single leg happy baby pose. Left hand can encourage that left hip to kind of stay rooted down. If that doesn't feel supportive in the body, you can take a bend in the knee for a little more support on that left side. Drawing right knee down towards the underarm, towards the side ribs. And releasing that right side, we'll hug the left knee in towards the chest. Keeping the neck long, shoulder blades connected down onto the mat. If you need to tuck something underneath the head, take the time to do that. Hands can come to lace behind the right leg and hug in towards the hip crease for a hamstring stretch. Taking a couple deep breaths here, slowing down, letting go. And then bending into that left knee and coming into the single leg happy baby pose. Sole of the foot up towards the sky. Right hand can press down towards the right hip crease. Left knee draws in towards the left rib cage, side waist. And then releasing from that. Taking the time to take any other stretches or poses that you'd like to take. And then making your way to Shavasana, corpse pose, resting pose. And just letting the body breathe itself here. Nothing that needs to be done. Simply allowing this magnificent machine that we are operate. Resting. No need to do anything. Letting go.
I have a quote to share with you while you're here in this quiet space. This one is from Roy T. Bennett. Real change begins at the end of your comfort zone. So ending kind of how we started with those mindful breaths. Breathing in deeply, experiencing the breath from the inside out, and breathing out deeply. And please feel free to stay resting as long as you would like to, or feel free to come up to a seated position. I'd like to thank you all so very much for sharing your practice and sharing your positive energy with each other and with me this morning. Namaste.